My name is Darren. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video will be the 6th episode for this mini-series on the experience of vocal horsepower, one of the 3 types of opera singing among the 9 elements of opera. For today's episode, I'll be presenting a third opera, Andrea Chenier by Umberto Giordano. Umberto Giordano's opera Andrea Chenier opens in an estate belonging to the noble French family of the de Coignys in the countryside. The de Coigny servants are preparing for an evening party thrown by the head of the family, the Contessa de Coigny. The first of the main characters to appear in this opera, Carlo Gerard, who will later become the rival, is among these servants. He sings the first musical number of this opera. The first half of this number is a song mocking the nobles for their lack of shame. Halfway through the musical number, an elderly servant appears, struggling with the furniture he's moving. Gerard runs to help him. The elderly servant is his father. After Gerard and his father are done, he helps his father to a chair for him to recover his energy. Seeing his father's struggles moves Gerard to singing the second half of the musical number, a song pouring out his sympathy for the exploitation his father has suffered from his noble masters. When Gerard thinks of how society has condemned him to a similar fate by virtue of his social station, he wells up with indignation. His indignation will spill over in a raging declaration that he anticipates the destruction of his degenerate masters. Gerard's rage will reach boiling point at the moment when the singer performing the role, dramatic baritone Piero Cappuccilli, rounds off the musical numbers with high notes that ring with a violent threat. For this musical number, I'll only be showing you the later part of the raging declaration with the high notes because this is the only really good portion of it. The second of the main characters in this opera, the heroine, Maddalena de Coigny, now appears together with her mother, the Contessa de Coigny. The Contessa checks with Gerard if everything is ready for the party that evening. Maddalena asks which guest will be coming. At the urging of her mother, she then hurries to dress for the party with the assistance of her maid Bercy. Maddalena sings her first musical number in this opera, a musical monologue where she complains about the restrictive outfits she's obliged to wear for the party. Musically, this monologue is nothing special, but dramatically is to show the carefree life Maddalena leads before events later in the opera take a drastic turn for her. The guests arrive for the party. One of them, the writer Flavio, brings along a poet, who's the last of the main characters in this opera to appear, our hero Andrea Chenier. Another guest, L'Abate, a priest, brings disturbing news from the French capital, Paris. The French ordinary masses are starting to express their dissatisfaction with the French upper classes more openly. At that time, Paris is the place which sets the tone for the rest of the country, so you can imagine, if there are signs of rebellion there, it's only a matter of time before they spread to the vicinity of the de Coigny family's countryside estate. True enough, they eventually will, with nasty consequences as we shall see. If you're watching this opera, the atmospheric scenes between the highlights are there to transport you to the time before and during the French Revolution, the period when the opera is set. Examples are the Contessa de Coigny supervising the preparations for her party, Maddalena grumbling about her clothes, and the guests discussing current events. In themselves, these atmospheric scenes are sideshows, musical fillers that are ordinary and have no direct implication on the main storyline of the opera. However, they are there for you to soak in the mood or the spirit of those eras making the drama of the opera more lifelike. If you're listening to the opera on CD or a music streaming platform, these atmospheric scenes will help you to understand why the characters in the opera behave the way they do. They supply the musical highlights with greater emotional depth. Either way, the atmospheric scenes will add color and nuance to the opera, enabling you to enjoy its drama even more. Back to the opera. Labarthe's news from Paris are swiftly forgotten when Flaville announces that a company of artists will be performing a short act from an opera ballet to his lyrics with a pastoral theme. The noble guests delude themselves into thinking that the people in the countryside are living similarly carefree lives. The Contessa de Coigny asks Chenier to contribute a poem to liven up the party, which he declines. Their conversation intrigues Maddalena, who's nearby with her friends. She decides to try her luck with Chenier. Chenier turns her down, claiming that his inspiration is as unpredictable as love. His response results in laughter from Maddalena and her friends. Apparently, Maddalena and her friends had made a bet that she could coax a poetic word out of Chenier's mouth. That word is love. She taunts Chenier, implying that his inspiration is nothing special if the poetic words she furnishes him are words that anybody could say without inspiration. Mortally offended, Chenier answers with the offer of a spontaneous poetry recital where he'll demonstrate his gift for poetry. This poetry recital is part of the first great showpiece in this opera, known as the Improviso, because of how it starts out as a poem composed by the title role on the spot. If you still remember the poetry we were once made to study in school, which doesn't necessarily have to be in English, a poem is like one or more pictures represented in verse. The first part of the Improviso is something like that. There are a series of images which the tenor performing the showpiece will use his voice to evoke. I'll be using these images to show you how you can enjoy this aria. For the first image, I want you to imagine a field. This is a field that's covered with lush vegetation. It can be flowers, it can be crops. When you look at this field, the field seems to stretch into the horizon. From the point you're at, you can't see where the field ends. Above the field is a sky of the clearest, purest blue. The sun that's shining upon this field is not the raging sun of today's summer, but the genial sun of the summer of decades before. A sun that blankets the earth rather than scorching it. When the music of the Improviso starts playing, you feel that a bright sky hangs over you. When the tenor singing the role of Chenier sings the first section of the Improviso, it's as though his voice is directing you to look beyond you. As he sings, the poetry of his singing seems to be sowing seeds that burst into blooming flowers or ripening crops ahead of you. His voice seems like it's rolling a green or yellow carpet before you, a carpet that looks like a fertile field. You feel that his voice will gradually rise towards the end, rolling that carpet faster and faster until it goes out of your sight. I'll let you experience this when we'll now hear the tenor playing the role of Chenier in this performance sing this section.
L'azzurro spazio guardai profondo e ai prati colmi di fiore io veda l'oro il sole e folgorava il mondo pare alla terra un'immane di scrigno il firmamento.
Jose Carreras is the tenor for our performance. Did you hear how the sentences he sings seem to travel in a straight line, one after the other? Did you also hear how the syllables of each sentence he sings seem to be joined together? That ability to join the syllables in each sentence together such that the sentence seems to flow is known as legato. Carreras' ability to keep his sentences flowing smoothly is a sign of his technical skill. After hearing this first section, we'll move on to the second section, which brings another image to mind. For this second image, we are still on that field. I want you to imagine that you're lying down on that field of abundance. It's like a bed of flowers or crops. You can feel them stroking your back lightly. When you take a deep breath, you inhale the aroma of the vegetation around you. This spot is your little paradise on this earth. You're so glad to be here that a whirlpool of delight begins to take shape in your heart. It quickly gathers momentum until it overpowers you to the point you want to squeal out in joy. Life cannot be happier at that moment. When you listen to the background music of the second section, it will sound like it's tenderly rippling along. Your senses will feel as though they are being massaged. The second image Chenier is calling to our minds is a truly beautiful scene. It can already stir up such emotion in us, the audience, let alone him, the poet. Just like how we perceive that whirlpool of delight taking shape in our hearts as we listen to Chenier sing, we can perceive the emotion building up in the tenor playing the role until it reaches the point where he is so overwhelmed that he can't help releasing that pent-up emotion in a dramatic outburst. This outburst will occur at the words tamo. After that point, the tenor will keep that emotional high for a while before he gently climbs down for the next section. We'll now hear Carreras sing the second section so you can undergo these sensations.
Alla mia fronte veniva una carezza viva, un bacio, grida hai vinto, amore, amo, oh che mi baci divinamente bella, oh patria mia.
Carreras is a lyric tenor, so he was well able to manage the more lyrical passages, the parts which required graceful singing as we heard earlier. However, when it came to the more dramatic part, that part where he had to give that outburst, he was only able to display a moderate amount of vocal horsepower. His voice did leave some ring in our ears, but that ring only lasted long enough to have a fleeting impact on us. If you heard the dramatic tenors Mario Del Monaco and Franco Corelli in our previous episodes, you will know that the voices of true dramatic tenors have significantly more penetrative power. The ring their voices leave lasts long enough to produce a physical reaction in us. From this comparison, it's apparent that Carreras might seem underpowered in the more dramatic passages. As a lead tenor role which has both lyrical and dramatic passages, Chenier is a Spinto role which is a combination of the outstanding qualities of lyric and dramatic tenors. Hence, by doing well in the lyrical passages and getting by in the dramatic passages, Carreras' performance can be regarded as competent here nonetheless. Before we return to the improviso, let's stop here for a little while. All the musical highlights after the improviso will be structured the same way. The composer of this opera, Umberto Giordano, has a style which is rather different from the other composers whose music we've heard in previous episodes. Giordano's best melodies are quite short. Usually, they will be at the beginning of a section of a musical highlight or at some point in the musical highlight when its level of emotion becomes so intense that it spills over in the form of an outburst. Examples will include the melodies that suggest the bright sky and the massage. Both of them were quite brief, wouldn't they? When the melodies end, the singers in the various highlights, who aren't restricted to the tenor Chenier, as we shall hear later on, will sing those running sentences until the next section or the point when the singer's character is moved to make his or her outburst. Maybe not so much in the excerpts we just heard, but definitely later on, we will hear that these sentences are sung in a way that sounds like singing but doesn't quite sound like it either. This style of singing is known as parlando. You can understand it as melodic declamation, or talking in a sing-song way, or declaimed melody, or singing where the singer uses a certain tone, inflections, and or stresses in their singing to such an extent that their singing can come across as uttering. For the rest of the Andrea Chenier videos, I'll only be presenting the parlando parts if they add to our understanding of the characters in the opera, or help us appreciate its drama better, or they're outstandingly dramatic. Most of the excerpts I'll be presenting will be the parts of the highlights which contain the outstanding melodies. The melodies are where Giordano differs from the other composers whose music we've heard in previous episodes. For these composers like Verdi and Puccini, the melody is shaped by the rhythm of the singing, while the orchestral accompaniment is there to set the atmosphere. However, for Giordano's case, the melody is shaped by the orchestra instead on top of the usual role it fulfills. This explains why the tunes we heard during the two sections of the improviso just now seem to come from the orchestra rather than the singers. This will generally be the case for the upcoming musical excerpts. And now, let's return to the improviso. The first part of the improviso, the spontaneous poetry recital we listened to just now, has 4 sections. We've already heard the first 2 sections. The last 2 sections are similar, so it's only necessary to present one of them. Unlike the first 2 sections, which present idealized images of the countryside that his noble audience likes to see as their unspoiled retreat, these 2 sections are presenting raw images of what the countryside is really like. In the last section, which we'll be listening to, Chenier sings about the farmer flinging vulgarities at Mother Nature for not producing enough for him to feed his family on, and the world around him for condemning his children to suffer as he does. Towards the end, the part about the world condemning the farmer's children, Chenier starts to feel so indignant that his singing becomes agitated. This indignation grows quickly to the point his final words are almost spat out. If not, Chenier would have choked on them. Let's hear it for ourselves.
Arcai degli abiti di luscia, con uomini cammoniava testariato la suora, e l'aria appena sazia, e contro a Dio scagliava, e con vari uomini le lacrime dai figli.
During the excerpt I just played, did you notice the way Carreras was singing? You can't really make out a tune from the way he was singing just now. There was some emphasis or even force in certain areas that disrupts any tune that could be produced with the lyrics. It doesn't really sound like singing, but at the same time, you can't really say it's talking either. The words Carreras was uttering flows too smoothly to sound like speaking. What Carreras was doing in that excerpt is an example of parlando. Parlando is declaimed melody or melodic declamation. From the word declamation, you can infer that parlando would be of greater advantage to a dramatic tenor. A dramatic tenor's voice will have the necessary weight to make the words sing deeper, deep enough to drive home their meaning, such that even a listener who doesn't understand Italian can tell that there's something to those words. There's another noteworthy thing during the excerpt. Did you also notice that the nobles at the party all turned their backs on Chenier? These nobles are the class of people responsible for the farmers' suffering due to their wicked rents and tolls. Nobody likes being confronted with the uncomfortable truth of their ugly selves. Not that Chenier particularly cares. He was already quite antisocial during the party, as we have seen. He didn't really approve their ways. However, there was one person whom he saw in a different light. This leads us to the second part of the improviso. In the second part of the improviso, it turns out that person was Maddalena. Chenier first sings that he saw something in her eyes which differentiated her from the others at the party, the ability to feel pity. In the upcoming excerpt, which comes right after, He sings that expression in her eyes made him feel that she possesses such beauty that crowns her above everybody else. However, her flippant taunting has proven this to be a mirage that dismayed him. Now we shall hear it. Listen to how the orchestral music seems to bloom at its opening, the part where Chenier sings about Maddalena's beauty, and how it wanes at its end, the part where Chenier sings about his disillusionment. If you ask me, as much as I do enjoy Carreras' refined singing in the excerpt we've just heard, I think it's the blooming orchestral accompaniment that delights me more. The next excerpt from the improviso we'll be listening to, its closing section will be different. Here is the singer who will get to shine. In this excerpt, Chenier delivers his comeback in response to Maddalena's frivolous comments about love. During the excerpt, you hear two high notes. Both are on the word amor, the Italian word for love. I'll now play Chenier's comeback. Chenier's comeback roughly translates as, "You do not understand what love is. Love is a blessing from the heavens that's not to be tossed about lightly, for the driving force of the cosmos is love." Carreras sang the first high note with vigor, and he flaunted his vocal horsepower by suspending the second high note, the note I believe to be the final one in that musical number. His rendition of the aria truly deserves its minute-long applause, especially for the way he was able to rise to the occasion of ending it well. Chenier's comeback shames Maddalena into apologizing. In giving that recital, Chenier has worked himself up so much, he's now barely able to get a grip on himself. He excuses himself. The improviso is truly a tremendous musical number when even the character giving it is so shaken by it. To the Contessa di Coigny's party, it is a mere wet blanket. Little does she know that that is a child's blanket compared to what awaits her. A mob of tattered malnourished peasants barge in onto the estate. The Contessa di Coigny is outraged. She demands to know how did they barge in. Gerard steps out owning up to that. The Contessa orders that the peasants and Gerard be expelled from her home. Gerard retorts that he's about to walk out anyway since he feels ashamed to be eating when everybody else in his social class is starving. The elderly servant struggling to move the furniture in the earlier part of this act, Gerard's father, begs for the Contessa's forgiveness. Gerard helps him up and persuades him to join him. They leave, but not before Gerard takes off his uniform and throws it in front of the Contessa. This gesture infuriates the Contessa to the point she begins to sway. Some of her guests offer her support. With their aid, she lurches towards the sofa to recover her composure. You already saw how the noble guests from the same social class as the Contessa behaved when Chenier drew attention to the peasants' hardship. The Contessa is even worse. Not only do the peasants' wretched appearance fail to arouse any sympathy in her heart, but she even blames Gerard's rebellion on his self-education. If that's not heartless enough, she even complains that she's already been kind enough to the peasants by dressing plainly when she's giving them her daily alms. After coming down, the Contessa instructs that her party shall resume. The part of Gerard walking out on the Contessa di Coigny is the final part of this first act or scene from the opera Andrea Chenier. Other than the closing act or scene from this opera, all the finales like this part are all action scenes. Unlike earlier operas which end their acts with grand ensembles, the opera Andrea Chenier ends its acts or scenes, except its closing act or scene, in a sensational way like Gerard's walkout. Gerard's walkout is somewhat shocking, but this is merely a salad. Umberto Giordano and the opera's librettist, the one who penned its lines, Luigi Illica, have only just laid out their dramatic course. Let's go on to the next act or scene from the opera to see what musical delicacies they prepared for us. Scene or Act 2 opens in Paris. The year is 1794. It's been a number of years since the party at the noble de Coigny's family's countryside estate. It's now the peak of the reign of terror during the French Revolution. What do you understand by the word terror? Great fear, right? Most of the characters who appear in this scene or act are living under a shadow of great fear. In the first few parts of this scene or act, Umberto Giordano and Luigi Illica seek to generate such an atmosphere by introducing a strong sense of danger that will constantly lie in ambush for the rest of this scene or act. To supply you with the background knowledge, the French Revolution resulted in the French masses overthrowing their king, Louis XVI, and installing a republican government in its place. The Reign of Terror was the period towards the end of the French Revolution when there was a lot of political instability in France. Do you remember how cold-blooded the nobles at the party at the Coigny's were? These nobles were purged during the French Revolution by the masses who've been boiling with resentment against them for many years. At the same time, the Republican government at that time, the Committee of Public Safety, felt quite insecure about its position. Not surprisingly, when there were sympathizers of the deposed royal family plotting against the government, and all the other major European powers were at war with France due to their fear that the revolution might spread to them. Besides continuing to purge the nobles, the committee also purged its own ranks and those people who did not agree with its leadership. One of the people in the later category was the poet Andrea Chenier, who is the inspiration for the title role in this opera, Andrea Chenier. Back to the opera. The strong sense of danger that Umberto Giordano and Luigi Illica introduces into the scene or act is embodied in the character L'Incredibile, a spy for the Committee of Public Safety. At the opening of scene or act 2, we find L'Incredibile confronting the first of the characters from scene or act 1 to return, Bercy, Maddalena's maid, who's now a streetwalker or a prostitute plying her trade on the streets of Paris. L'Incredibile suspects Bercy is hiding something. The first musical number in this scene or act is a song Bercy sings proclaiming her enthusiasm for the committee's work to deflect L'Incredibile's suspicions. She fails to convince him. L'Incredibile sees through her act. He's been hunting for someone. I'll reveal who that person is later. L'Incredibile has seen this person with Bercy. He decides to spy on her. Just then, his radar has detected another person, our hero Andrea Chenier. All this while, Chenier has been nearby, waiting for somebody. After Bercy and L'Incredibile exit, the person Chenier had been awaiting, Boucher, shows up. He sneaks a passport to Chenier, advising him to flee the country. Chenier, just like his source character, Andrea Chenier, is on the committee's hit list. He refuses Boucher's advice. The interaction between Boucher and Chenier comes in the form of a duet. Tucked inside this duet is a musical monologue by Chenier that stands out enough to be regarded as a highlight, just like the improviso we listened to just now. This monologue begins with Chenier singing about his belief in a supernatural presence that leads us in different directions along the road of life in both good and bad ways. In the first excerpt I've picked from this monologue, which comes next, he gives two examples of these directions. A man may be led to write poetry, another to fight in a battle. Chenier then sings his direction is to remain where he is.
mio destino forse equivollemi, se quel che bramo mi si avvera, resta.
For that excerpt we just heard, the orchestral music in the background is of greater interest than the singing. There are 3 musical themes, each which lasted a number of seconds, that Umberto Giordano inserted here. The first theme was when Chenier sang Tu sarai poeta, or You Shall Be a Poet. The music for that theme makes me think of someone gazing at stars above. It's the type of music that you associate with a dreamy poet. The second theme was when Chenier sang Ate una spada, or Here's a Sword. The music for that theme is appropriately martial, and Carreras accordingly applied some vocal horsepower to give it a masculine touch. The third theme was the type that makes me think something decisive is about to happen. This was for the part where Chenier sang He's Been Directed to Remain. Chenier's choice will decide how the rest of the opera is going to develop. Normally, when there are specific details in the libretto which the composer wants to highlight, they will use the vocal music with or without the orchestral music. This will be reflected in the style the singer uses to sing. However, for Giordano's case, he preferred to use the orchestra, which explains why he inserted the 3 musical themes I mentioned earlier. As a person with sharp theatrical instincts, he knew which parts of the libretto to reserve his prime melodies for. The next excerpt I've selected from this monologue, its most important portion, is the part which received what I think is the best music in this highlight. In this excerpt, which comes shortly after the previous one, Chenier sings that the reason why he's been directed to remain is because he's to meet the woman who's meant to be the love of his life, his ideal woman. I'll share it with you now.
Sentita sul mio cammin vicina passar la donna che il destin fa mia. Bella, ideale, divina come la poesia,
I especially love that excerpt we heard because there is a warm innocence in the music which makes my heart really go out to Chenier. You can say it's naivety, but I prefer to see it as a fairy tale sincerity. When I listen to it, I feel that he is trusting us with his innermost thoughts. In today's world, it's so rare to receive such an artless confession, don't you think? The music ripened when Chenier described his ideal woman with such yearning. You can feel him brimming with the excitement of a boy who've just had his first crush as he sings how he can feel she's been around him all this while. After that excerpt, Chenier sings that there has been something he feels that woman has been desperately trying to tell him. During the last excerpt, which I chose from this monologue, he discloses it to us. Have faith in love, Chenier, for there is someone who truly loves you. This is the conclusion of the monologue, so it's the part with the customary high note that Carreras dispatches resoundingly here.
Più volte ha parlato la sua voce al mio cuore, uditi io sovente con la sua voce ardente dirmi
I think that high note was more effective than the others we heard earlier. It had more penetrative power. I could feel it pierce some distance into my skull. The words credi or have faith, where the high note lay, is particularly important because it's Chenier's faith in love that determines how he's going to act for the rest of the opera. When Chenier's done with this monologue, he confides in Boucher that the woman he sang about has been sending letters to him. Chenier secretly shows Boucher the latest letter, requesting for their first meetup that night. Boucher inspects the letter. He comments that the letter looks like something a Parisian prostitute is using to bait him. Chenier realizes Boucher has a point. He is heartbroken. Chenier accepts Boucher's passport. Now the next character to return from scene on Act 1, Carlo Gerard, makes his entrance. Gerard is now a member of the French Revolutionary Parliament. We next see Gerard with L'Incredibile. Now we know whom L'Incredibile has been working for. From their conversation, it turns out Gerard has tasked L'Incredibile with hunting a heavenly beauty whom he had chanced upon recently. He is terribly in love with her. L'Incredibile promises to track her down and returns to his spying. Just then, a group of Parisian prostitutes, with Bercy being one of them, emerges. She catches sight of Boucher and Chenier who are about to leave. Being aware that L'Incredibile is spying on her, Bercy whispers to Boucher, asking him to hold Chenier back a little longer. He agrees. L'Incredibile chooses this moment to intercept Bercy. They leave together. It's now nightfall. Boucher suggests to Chenier that this is the opportunity for Chenier to make his getaway. Bercy returns, informing Chenier that a woman called Speranza, who's under serious threat, will be meeting him shortly, before she hurries away. Despite Boucher's warning that this meeting might be an ambush, Chenier agrees. Speranza is the woman who sent Chenier the letter he showed Boucher. L'Incredibile reappears. He has prepared something and conceals himself. As I said earlier, L'Incredibile is the personification of danger. When you see him about, you know that there'll be trouble. Currently, it's not time for L'Incredibile to strike yet. A woman in simple clothes arrives in great anxiety, followed by Chenier. He, unable to identify her, asks if she's the person who requested to meet him. The woman was saying to jog his memory. This is something we've heard before. You may be able to identify her. What that woman sang was Chenier's comeback at the party on the de Coigny family's estate. She removes her bonnet. The woman is Maddalena de Coigny. L'Incredibile recognizes her as the beauty Gerard tasked him to track. He slips away immediately to summon Gerard. Maddalena notices someone has been watching them. Chenier searches for them. He fails to find them. Nevertheless, he senses that their meeting spot is no longer safe. Maddalena assures him that she could pass herself off as Bercy's servant if anyone were to question them. Chenier asks if she was the one who has been sending him letters under the name Speranza. The part when Maddalena appeared is considered the beginning of a duet between her and Chenier. The duets in this opera are quite different from those in other operas, like the ones in the previous episodes, because the characters in the duet are given musical monologues to sing. Now's the time for Maddalena's musical monologue in this duet. Maddalena begins her monologue by singing how she, a noble being actively pursued by the Committee of Public Safety, had wanted to seek Chenier's assistance in obtaining refuge when he had some political influence. She shied away then because she was scared of how he would have reacted. Then she sings that destiny brought her within his presence, and how seeing him from afar made her feel he's like an older brother. The later section has the best music in this monologue. It touchingly reflects Maddalena's genuine happiness on being reunited with him. Maddalena in this performance is sung by dramatic soprano Eva Martin. Hear how she makes her voice float towards the end when she describes how she feels Chenier like a brother in a sweet way. Did you hear how big Martin's voice was in that excerpt? Martin was a dramatic soprano, but her role, Maddalena, is a spinto role like Chenier. At the time of that performance, Martin was already singing the heavier soprano roles like Turandot, one of her signature roles. Now to return to the opera. Maddalena later continues her monologue. She sings that she's been writing to him, believing that he'll take her under his wing. Meanwhile, Versi had been helping Maddalena evade arrest, but Maddalena knows it's only a matter of time before it will be her turn. Yet, she only dared to approach Chenier when he's lost his influence, under the assumption he'll be less likely to reject her in such circumstances. Maddalena begs for Chenier's assistance. Her appeal moves Chenier's heroic heart. It draws out a romantic musical monologue from him. In this monologue, Chenier sings how his love for Maddalena inspires him with the boldness to face anything. Despite this being their first meetup since the party at her family's estate, he had fallen in love with her over her encouraging letters during these threatening times. Chenier tells Maddalena he will take her under his wing. Even death will not separate them thereafter. Let's listen to this section, whose ardent music makes it worth hearing complete. And now for Martin and Carreras to round off the duet with an attempt to use their vocal horsepower to release high notes capable of storming the heavens.
la morte
Gerard and L'Incredibile intrude on the lovers Maddalena and Chenier. Chenier rushes to head him off while Maddalena runs for it. He calls out to Voucher, who's been nearby, to rescue Maddalena. L'Incredibile chases Maddalena, but is deterred by a gun Voucher points at him. Chenier and Gerard duel. Chenier defeats Gerard, and injured Gerard collapses. He now recognizes Chenier. He urges Chenier to flee and take Maddalena with him to safety. Chenier heeds his advice. Some people spot the injured Gerard and rush to his assistance. They ask him who's done this to him. Gerard pleads ignorance. The scene or act ends with these people demanding for the death of Gerard's attacker. In the first 2 episodes, I explained what this experience is about and the difference it makes in full-length operas. In the past 3 episodes, we got to experience its impact in 2 operas, Verdi's Otello and Puccini's Turandot, where vocal horsepower is in abundance. For vocal horsepower is a type of opera singing which values weight and penetrative power. Weight refers to the heftiness or bulk of a singer's voice, while penetrative power refers to the ability of that voice to sink itself deep into the bones, the guts, as well as the heart of a listener, and leave a ringing aftershock in their ears. The most famous feature of vocal horsepower is the high notes sung by its practitioners during the opera's most emotional moments. High notes by practitioners of vocal horsepower are different from those by other types of opera singers because the quality of their high notes is defined by their strength, their loudness, and of course, how long they are held. A well-delivered high note can send an electric current racing through us and trigger an inward surge of adrenaline. When it comes to the most prominent practitioner of vocal horsepower, the dramatic tenor, the title role of Verdi's Otello, and the role of the unknown prince, or in Italian, Il Principe Ignoto, or Calaf in Puccini's Turandot, are high up in his repertoire. For real-life examples, in the case of a dramatic tenor, refer back to the duet between Otello and Iago, the Vengeance or Oath duet, Si per cielo, and the unknown prince's first aria, Non piangere Liu. In comparison, the tenor role in Umberto Giordano's Andrea Chenier, the title role, does require a substantial amount of vocal horsepower, but not as much as the 2 roles I mentioned. Remember that spectrum I showed you, illustrating the different weight categories for the various classes of singers in opera? I consider the title role in Umberto Giordano's Andrea Chenier a Spinto tenor role. Other than the title role of Verdi's Otello and the role of the unknown prince, most if not all the leading roles in the Italian dramatic tenor repertoire are actually Spinto tenor roles. What is a Spinto tenor role? A Spinto tenor role is a halfway point between a lyric tenor role and a dramatic tenor role. Dramatic tenors whose voices already have more than enough weight can sing these roles by applying some restraint so they can sing some passages gracefully. Lyric tenors can attempt these roles if their voices have gained enough weight with increasing age by pushing up their voices to give them the necessary penetrating power for the other forceful passages. In the case of a lyric tenor, we'll be listening to that in this video. For my videos, I hope to introduce everybody to as wide a variety of great opera singers as possible. Despite the 2 dramatic tenors I presented in the past 3 episodes, Mario del Monaco and Franco Corelli being legendary interpreters of the role of Andrea Chenier, who've left the performances preserved on video, I've decided to use another tenor instead. The tenor for today's episode is a singer from more recent times, one of the 3 tenors who's sort of active today, though in a different way, Jose Carreras. Jose Carreras was a lyric tenor who rocketed to the top rank in the late 1970s, where he enjoyed a brief prime before he was tragically struck down by leukemia in the late 1980s. Rather than being a top dramatic tenor in Italian opera, he was more a lyric tenor who rapidly graduated to bigger and heavier leading roles in the Spinto tenor repertoire. Spinto tenor roles are roles that can be sung by both lyric and dramatic tenors. Carreras' voice wasn't as robust and or enormous as Mario del Monaco's and Franco Corelli's, but he could give his voice a considerable amount of penetrative power. It didn't leave as strong an aftershock as those two, but it did last long enough to impress the fans who accorded him his leading status. Where Carreras stands out is the natural beauty of his voice. As you will hear later, his singing is very pure and smooth. The sentences seem to flow naturally straight out of Carreras' mouth once he's able to force them out. His voice has the feel of dark fabric. The purity and smoothness of Carreras' singing are qualities more associated with opera singers from the lyric class. This performance we'll be listening to is towards the end of Carreras' prime. In his earlier days, the tint of his voice was more pronounced and the texture of his voice was richer. However, moving into the bigger and heavier leading roles too quickly caused that tint to fade and wore down that rich texture. Even so, whatever remained was sufficiently noteworthy to earn him a place along Pavarotti and the other fella when they teamed up to form the three tenors. When compared with Del Monaco and Corelli, Carreras is nearly decent, but this decency, when you look at it from today's standards, is still a very high standard to attain. If you'd like to know how the lovers Maddalena and Chenier will end up, please do watch the next episode. If you had fun watching this video, please help me like it. If you'd like to continue chasing this series, please subscribe to my channel. If you wish to express your views about it or discuss it further, please feel free to leave a comment. Thank you, and stay tuned.